resource. And I'm actually going to put together a Google website for this class where I'm going to post all of the previous class sessions that you guys missed. You'll just be able to go to the link to the website and click on the videos. They'll be posted on YouTube, so you'll just be able to play those and see those. And we have 3 more in the series that you guys can participate. And everybody's can participate either by logging in or by being in person. Let me go ahead and get this PowerPoint open and shared. We can see that. All right, so this week we are talking, I'm going to take this off so I'm not muffled. We're talking about early literacy behaviors. And so this session is not necessarily about how to teach your children specifically how to read, but it is focusing on teaching them and modeling for them the behaviors that lead to their ability to be able to read. It looks like somebody has called in and joined us. Who's with us?
Patty.
Welcome. We're just getting started, so you really haven't missed anything.
Okay.
All right. So as I said, early literacy behaviors. And so these are the things that are the precursors to a child's ability to read and to write. And so some goals that I've set for us in this session are to define what developmentally appropriate literacy teaching and learning looks like in early childhood. So it's very important that we match what we're doing in terms of how we're interacting with our children with what we know about child development. We're also going to recognize the importance of play in pre-kindergarten and kindergarten. And talk about why that's important. And that's going to be a precursor to our entire next session is going to take a deep dive into doing some brain smart play with your children. And then we're also going to examine the routines of interactive reading and writing that promote literacy behaviors that I'm talking about. And I actually have some books that we're going to read together to kind of demonstrate how to do that reading in an interactive way. Many times we begin reading to our children when they're very young, and we're kind of doing all of the work. We're reading the story, we're being animated, we have them in our lap, we're cuddling with them, pointing at the pictures, all that kind of thing. We're going to talk about this week is shifting that as your child gets older into them having some ownership in that process as they're able to do that. So we'll look at those things too. Now, I include this graphic here about the pendulum swing. In education, there tends to be this big swing, particularly when we're thinking about early childhood education, from a really kind of play-based setting for young children. A lot of times we think about that setting as, like a child care center where children are just playing all day. There's not really any kind of structured instruction happening. On the other side, we have an approach where you'll see kids sitting, even at very young age, filling out workbooks, answering questions, all that kind of stuff, doing some like reading and writing type things. And, we have this propensity in education to kind of get on one side or the other of that argument. There's a lot of people out there that really understand the importance of play and how powerful it is in terms of a means for children to learn. And then there are other people that say, oh, that's just a bunch of hooey, all that play stuff. We got to do some real teaching and, have our kids doing some drill and practice of some skills and all that kind of thing. Wise person told me one time that for every mile of road, it's 2 miles of ditch. Okay, you got a ditch on the right side and you got a ditch on the left side, right? So for every mile, we've got a ditch on one side, a ditch on the other, okay? I'm going to ask you a question. When you're driving down the road, which ditch are you supposed to be in? You're going to be in the ditch? No, you're not going to be in the ditch. No, stop texting and driving and get out of the ditch. Okay. No, you're supposed to keep it on the road. Now you were answering the question about the center line. You're supposed to be to the right, unless you're in England, to of the center line. But you're still balanced on the road. It's okay to be a little bit on the right of that line and or on the other side if you're coming from the other direction, but we want to avoid the ditch. And so when we're thinking about facilitating a child's literacy, their ability to read and to write, we don't want to take an approach that is so regimented like some people do when they get in that one ditch on the one side of the pendulum swing. Nor do we want to be in a place where we're just so focused on play that we're not doing anything with any intentionality. We need to be engaging children in the process of learning to read and write, but that doesn't necessarily mean drill and practice like the other ditch wants us to do. Okay, so what we want to do is to bring that pendulum. Welcome, thank you. We got pizza and some drinks right there if you'd like some. It's bringing us to a balanced approach where we're utilizing the power of play, but we're also doing some very intentional things about how we're interacting with the children. Now, this is my theory about how children learn. And I say that learning occurs through a very scientific process of fake it until you make it. I want you to think about it. Everything that you've ever learned in your entire life, you had to fake it until you made it, right? We see little children playing at home and they see mama taking care of the baby and they'll go get their baby dolls or their stuffed animals and they'll hold their babies and they'll act like they're feeding their babies like they've seen their mama or their daddy doing. They're beginning that process of faking it until they make it, right? They're trying it out. They're playing with the idea of doing it. I've been teaching at the college level for 20 years this semester. I know I do not look old enough to have been doing it that long. The first time I taught a college class, I had never taught a college class before. I had to go into that room and fake it until I made it. I had to act like I knew what I was doing until I figured out what I was doing. Everything that you've learned in life, you have learned through this process of fake it until you make it. The same thing is true about how your children are going to learn to read and write. They're going to have to go through a process where they act like they know how to read and write. They're going to engage in the behaviors that look like reading and writing. And then eventually, as they go through that process of playing with that idea of literacy, they're going to become literate. That's the way it works. So when we think about developmentally appropriate practice, what we want to be doing with our children, we want to encourage our children to do a lot of talking, a lot of observing, a lot of wondering about why things are the way they are. And we want to give them lots of opportunities to explore their environment. I want you to think about that person that's approaching literacy from that one ditch of doing drill and practice with worksheets and workbooks. Is there a lot of talking going on while a child's doing a worksheet? Not really. They're just kind of sitting there by themselves. Are they given the opportunity to observe things, to wonder about things? Not really. It's very kind of scripted. It's very direct. And they're certainly not getting the opportunity to explore the environment. In developmentally appropriate practice, children are also invited to have authentic, meaningful experiences with literacy. I used to have a job where I would go around the state and I would do evaluations and technical assistance in childcare centers. And inevitably, when I would go on a day that I was looking at a preschool classroom, I'd go in and they would be doing carpet time where they have all the children on the rug, all doing the same thing at the same time. And a lot of the teachers in the preschool would have a wall by that rug where they have like a calendar, and they have a letter chart and a number chart. They may have a bulletin board with some things on there, classroom helper, a schedule, those kinds of things. And so the teacher would be at the front, the children would all be on that rug. And a lot of times the teachers would have a stick so that they could point at all these things on the wall. And so they might start their time together and they might start talking about the calendar and the days of the week. Now, we know that children really don't master an understanding of the calendar until about second grade. But every preschool classroom I've ever been in, they focus in on that calendar anyway. And a lot of times they'll try to make it more child related. And so they'll sing a song about the days of the week. You probably heard them singing days of the week, right? They do it to that Addams Family thing. Kids don't know what the Addams Family is, by the way, probably. But we know what it is. And so we sing the song, we go through the days of the week. I went to this one school on the coast that's really standing out in my mind. And this one preschool teacher just really wanted to impress me because I was coming in to observe her classroom, and anybody would want to put on a good, show of what they do when somebody's watching them. She had a large group of preschoolers. She had all these preschoolers on the floor. And so she started going through that letter chart with all those letters of the alphabet. Now, instead of the entire class doing all the letters together, which is something that you see in a lot of places, she brought up each child one at a time. And while she pointed at that chart, they were saying those letters. Now, going back to the classrooms where you see everybody responding to the letter chart, okay? Everybody's A, B, C, okay? Have you ever heard that if you're in the choir at church and you miss choir practice, that if they threw in a new song that you didn't know was coming and here you are in front of everybody having to sing this song, if you'll move your mouth to watermelon, 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 it looks like you're singing along with everybody else, okay? You've got children when you're doing that choral going through that letter chart that already know those letters. And so as the teacher's pointing to the letters, they're calling out the letters, right? I'm going to ask you something. What are those children learning through that experience? Nothing. They already know the letters, right? They're not learning anything. You've got other children in that group that know a lot of the letters, but they don't necessarily know all of them. And so they're, they hear their friends say D and they real quickly say D, they're following their friends. So they're kind of learning some things. And then you've got other children in that group. Maybe they're younger, maybe just developmentally, they're not ready for this. They need something more concrete to latch these letters onto for them to really understand it. And those kids are sitting in that group going watermelon, watermelon, watermelon. They're really not connecting to any learning either because it's not an authentic experience. Now, I mentioned this one preschool. She called those kids up one at a time. By the time she got to the fourth kid going through all of those letters, the rest of the kids had murdered one another on that rug. I mean, it's just bedlam. The other thing about authentic experiences is that they are personal. It's a lot of one-on-one. That's why you as a parent have so much power in your child's literacy trajectory, even more so than that preschool teacher, because you're better able to get with them one-on-one. Guys, it's a very recent phenomenon in history to have the idea of a group of 2-year-olds or a group of 3-year-olds or a group of 4-year-olds all being in a setting together. Historically, you had children growing up in families and you had leveled ages of children. You didn't have 12 2-year-olds all at one time. You just had one, maybe two if you had twins, and you had older children that they were interacting with. When you put young children into group settings, it's just the way it works. That teacher cannot give that level of personalized attention that you are able to give them as a parent. Now, I'm not saying don't send your child to pre-K, because certainly there's a lot of evidence that there's some really powerful and wonderful things that can happen at pre-K, but you guys have more power, and I want you to remember that. The other thing is that children in a developmentally appropriate setting have regular opportunities to express themselves on paper through drawing and writing. We know that reading and writing are what we call reciprocal processes. If you learn to read, it's going to help you to learn to write. If you learn to write, it's going to support your ability to learn to read. They both work together. So unfortunately, what happens with a lot of people is that parents, teachers will focus on one, either reading or writing, at the expense of the other. We get the best opportunities when we have both. So you want to give your children opportunities to express themselves on paper. Note, I'm not saying filling in a worksheet here. Expression is more open-ended. It's focusing in on the things that they know. My daughter Lucy, when she was little, she was about 3 or 4, she learned how to write her name. She spells her name Luci because she's a Lucinda, okay? She's a senior in high school now, by the way. But when she was little, she learned how to write Lucy. And that's really true for a lot of children. They learn to write their name as one of the first things. And the reason for that is because their name is more concrete to them. It's more real to them. They literally personify their name, and so they connect with that. Usually starts with recognizing that first letter in their name, and then they pick up the other letters. My poor son, Charlie, when he got into kindergarten, he would on the top of his papers write CH because he had too many letters to deal with. He'd gotten the first part, but he was working on the rest. But Lucy learned how to write Lucy, and then she learned how to write the word loves. That's another thing that typically happens when children are learning to read and write, is they key in on words that have more power to them, emotional connection. And so that word loves was an emotional connection. And so she would come to me and she'd say, Daddy, how do you write cat? And I'd write cat on the paper. And then she'd take the paper and she'd write, Lucy loves cat, Lucy loves cat, Lucy loves cat, Lucy loves cat. Then she'd come back, how do you write daddy? So I'd write down daddy, and then she'd write, Lucy loves daddy, Lucy loves daddy, Lucy loves daddy. Lucy literally loved her way into being literate through that process of just expressing herself on paper. Now, my son Charlie, he was more of a drawer. My daughter Julia, who happens to be dyslexic, when she was that age, she was more of a drawer, but it was still important for her to express herself on paper. And she's engaging in a literacy behavior by doing that. The other thing we see in developmentally appropriate classrooms is abundant play opportunities that support that literacy learning. So in that preschool classroom that I talked about earlier, where the teacher is going through the alphabet, something that would be better, more authentic, something that could connect better to play opportunities would have been for her to do a read aloud with the students. And then to have a space in the classroom where she has all the props to that story. Maybe she's got one of those big books. She puts that over on an easel by all those props, and you see the children go out into their center playtime, and they are over there engaging with those props, acting out the story, going to the book and pretending like they're reading the story. They're just reading, remembering what the teacher said when she read the story. Or going to the art center and drawing pictures based on the story. It's more powerful when we're able to give students or children the ability to play connected to the literacy experiences they've had. The other thing that we want to see is explicit instruction in literacy learning. If you're sending your child to a pre-K program, you want to see teachers that are intentionally teaching literacy, doing these read alouds, sitting down with children, helping them to recognize letters and doing things like that as they're ready to do so. That is definitely developmentally appropriate. So we talked about what's developmentally appropriate. Let's talk for a second about what's inappropriate. It's inappropriate for young children to spend time filling in worksheets. Guys, it's inappropriate for older children to spend a lot of time filling in worksheets. There are so many better, more authentic ways for children to really dive into knowledge, the process of gaining knowledge, and really apply what they're learning. And worksheets are extremely limited in getting children to engage in a thinking process. Another thing that's inappropriate is instruction that's focused on repetitive drills. You know, a lot of parents want to buy a pack of flashcards for kids to recognize letters. There's some benefit, particularly if you're kind of playing with them and you're looking at the cards together and you're doing that. But if all of your literacy instruction is just doing flashcards all the time and doing drills with those, your children are not connecting to that authentic understanding of letters and how they represent these sounds and these words and all those kinds of things. You get a lot more benefit if you're reading stories and you're playing with them around those stories. Children's opportunities for writing are focused on correct spelling and proper handwriting. I mentioned that Lucy, when she was little, she learned how to write Lucy Loves. As she got older, she began saying to me, Daddy, I have these ideas in my head, but I just don't know how to spell the words to put them down. And I said, Lucy, you just get your ideas down on the paper. We can hire an editor to do the editing of those papers after you write them. When we focus too much at a young age on that correct spelling or just having precise handwriting, and by the way, young children are still developing their fine motor ability. They're not going to be able to have perfect handwriting. The way you work on perfect handwriting is getting those hands in Play-Doh and clay and working and building those muscles, and then eventually they're going to have better handwriting. I had horrible handwriting until I was 18 years old. At 18, I decided I was going to have better handwriting. So we got plenty of time to get the handwriting. What's more important is children engaging in literacy and getting their ideas down on paper. There are few opportunities provided for students to learn through these authentic literacy experiences that I was mentioning earlier. And in developmentally appropriate spaces, play is limited or discouraged. Play is the work of children. Children need lots of opportunities to play. When my twins were in kindergarten, they had what I called drill sergeant kindergarten teacher. She did a lot of what's on this list that's what we consider not developmentally appropriate. A lot of worksheets. In fact, they came home from kindergarten every day with 3 pages of homework that they had to do. There was lots of instruction with repetitive drills. They had fun Fridays. I didn't understand why they couldn't spread the fun throughout the whole week, but they did at least have fun Fridays. But when my twins were little, I bought all of these art supplies and educational toys. And I knew what they were focusing on at school because they'd come home and do the 3 pages of homework on it. And then I would see my children go up to their bedroom and they would play with those toys. They would use all those art supplies, and you could see them playing with all of the ideas that had been presented that day at kindergarten. And it felt like every evening we had just enough time for them to really play with those ideas and internalize them before they had to go to bed and start the whole process again. So play is important. It's part of creating that authentic experience for young children. So here's just a little tidbit for you. We know that guided playtime with make-believe, storytelling, and games can boost reading and math skills for kindergarten. So you get a benefit in both areas. The key word here is guided playtime. Now, children engage in, self-directed play, and that's wonderful too. This guided playtime is where you come alongside them as the parent, and you're also engaging in that play. You're asking them questions. You're making suggestions. You're getting on their level, and you're having that connection. This guy, David Elkind's written several books about the importance of play. And he talks about the essential role of play in learning. And this is a quote from him: "Love, work, and play are three inborn drives that power human thought and action throughout the life cycle." What Elkind is telling us is we just have a natural thing in us that causes us to want to connect with other people through relationships. It was super easy for me to love my mama when I was a little boy. I was actually took my grandmother to get her COVID vaccine a couple of weeks ago and had lunch with her afterwards. And we went to a restaurant where you could sit outside. And it just happened that my cousin showed up at the same place at the same time. So we were all sitting around reminiscing of being young and all that kind of thing. And just talking about how much we loved Granny growing up. And I told my granny, I said, I actually sometimes felt guilty because I loved my mama, but I loved my granny. And so love is just natural. Work is a natural thing. As you grow older, you kind of figure out what you want to do with your life. And if you find the right kind of work, you enjoy almost every bit of it. Everybody's got some part of their work that, is frustrating or that kind of thing. I'm very blessed that I have a job that pretty much, huge portion of it, I just love doing what I'm doing. And then play. Now, play is huge for young children. Love is probably the most powerful inborn drive that's happening for infants and toddlers. As children get older, that play becomes more important. And then, of course, as we get older, it transitions into work. There's still some element of love, work, and play always at work, though. And if we understand the power of love, we understand that you, as parents, have power to facilitate your child's development because they are connected to you. Years ago, there was this program that would be advertised on TV where you would sit your child in front of a television program and it was supposed to teach your baby to read. That program got sued because it really didn't work. And this is the problem. Patricia Kuhl is a researcher in Washington. She's done all of these tests where she puts babies in this huge contraption that's basically doing like a functional MRI. It's letting her see what's happening in the brain while a child's engaging in a variety of different activities. She did some studies where she had young children, engaging in literacy activities solely virtually with the TV screen. And then she had the children doing the same activity, hearing the same book, but there was a live caregiver there reading the book. When the children were looking at the screen, the areas of the brain where all that literacy learning is taking place were not being fired. No activity. It was the connection. It was the love that was making the learning happen. So you having your child in your lap and holding the book together is powerful in their literacy learning. Play is also powerful in terms of them being able to really internalize what they're learning in literacy. So I want to just take a moment. What observations have you made of children being read to or play reading for themselves? Play reading meaning they don't know how to read, but they're picking up the book and they're acting like they know how to read. Have you seen children doing that? Anybody want to share an example? Do you mind walking up here and talking in this so they can hear?
Hey, everybody. Yes, I am a TA, a teacher assistant, and I see it constantly every day. Where, because I work with PK through, see the smaller babies can't read, but they would get a book and they be like, they just get the book and they will open it up and they swear that they are reading. And it'd be so funny because I'd be like, they trying and they want to do it, but they can't. So then the older kids, some of those can read little words, but not a lot, but they also try the same thing. So I see it all the time. Yeah. Thank you so much.
So when you see children play reading like that, You see children engaging in the language of reading. Have you noticed that we sound different when we're reading a book than when we're just talking in a conversation? Even children that don't know how to read, that are just picking up the book and pretending to read it, you'll hear that different inflection in their voice as they're going through. You'll see them zeroing in on the pictures and using that as a cue to kind of tell the story. If their caregivers know what they're doing, they're reading the same book that has a very repetitive flow to it over and over and over to their children so that they can come back and read the story. Now, we know they're not reading the story, right? And they know they're really not reading the story. But this is the important thing that we've got to do. When we see them engaging in these play reading behaviors, we've got to celebrate that. We got to say, look at what you are doing. You are holding the book up the right way up, and you're turning the pages and you're looking at the pictures and you're telling the story that's in the book. You're doing what good readers do. You are reading. And the child's looking at you and saying, I don't think I'm reading, but she thinks I'm reading, so I must be reading. And that gives them the confidence to pick up the next book and to try the same process. Did you have something to add? Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. And so I'm going to repeat that just so everybody can hear. So what was said is that she's seen teachers who, they're reading the book, they'll stop and ask questions about the book for the children to respond to. And when the children are doing the play reading, they'll engage in that same kind of behavior and duplicate that. So wonderful. So what do children learn about early reading behaviors through the experience of simply having books read to them? What do they learn? They learn about emotional connection in reading books. Absolutely. We've already said a few things. They learn about that these squigglies on the page have some kind of connection to the pictorial representation, that these things go together and form words. They may not be able to decode it yet, but they're able to understand that. They learn that book language, that book talking that we were talking about. Yeah. Yeah, they know those pictures tie to those words. Absolutely. So when we're reading to children and they're engaging in this play reading, there's three critical areas that we're working on. Story awareness, that's the language structure, the meaning of the words that are being said, how those words are organized to form thoughts. You also have language awareness. That's that talking like a book that I was just talking about. And then you have print awareness, actually recognizing the letters and how the letters combine to form words, and then how those words are put together to form ideas. Okay. So story awareness, language awareness, and print awareness. I'm going to play a brief video for us. And while I'm playing the video, I want you to look for these three critical areas: the story awareness, the language awareness, and the print awareness.
Here.
Okay, so we're looking for that story awareness, language awareness, and print awareness.
That's his toy.
One day when Mickey go somewhere, he lost his toy where he lived carefully. And then he went.
Hold the book up and introduce us to the book. So tell us what we're reading.
Okay. Mickey thought this dog will have a green spot, but he don't know where it is. But he went off. He built a castle.
Okay, we're watching Teacher Harmony. All right. Okay.
Okay, so Mickey is taking a bath. Rubber ducky. Did it, rubber ducky?
Oh. Okay.
And they all can clear also where there can be.
Okay.
And that was scarecrow. And the bear was sitting in a chair and they were all together.
Very good, Harmony. Harmony's 3 years old. June 25th, 2008. Harmony's 3 years old and reading us a book.
And there were all the toys that Mickey had on the floor. He could have put them out and he could have put them back where they belong.
Okay, let's see. Let's see. Can you show it to us? Oh, so he put all the. Let me see one more time. He put all the toys back where they belong. Okay.
And then when he played with them, he get to see. Let's see what happened. Oh, okay. And Mickey got to sleep. As the room,
Oh, make you go to sleep. Okay. Very
he
good. Very good, Harmony. Okay, Harmony, read us a story.
All right, so we were looking for language awareness, story awareness, and print awareness. What did you guys see in terms of those 3 areas in that video? Yet she spoke well. Yep. Yeah. Yep. She had an organized story. It was an organized idea. Yeah, absolutely. Hmm. Yeah, she was pointing at things in the book. You can imagine while she's reading that book that she's either seen her parents or her teacher at school read a book exactly like that. Even the part where she stopped to predict what was going to happen. Well, let's see what happens, right? So that's all about that story awareness, language awareness. What about print awareness? Where is she with print awareness? Is she decoding those words on that page and reading that book to us? Yeah, she's still working on print awareness, but yeah. Yeah. So this is the thing. The story awareness and the language awareness are coming very natural through just the process of a parent reading to her, through teachers reading to her at school, maybe. We don't know if she goes to school or not. But that print awareness, she does on a basic level have an understanding that those words on that page, although she may not be able to decode them, that they do represent these ideas that she's expressing in the story and language awareness. And because she's developing that story and language awareness, and because she's engaging in the literacy behaviors, she's literally doing what I told you guys. She's faking it until she makes it. And her dad is sitting there by her, being powerful and helping her to believe that she's reading. Yeah. Right down the hall to the right. Yeah. 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 Did anybody online want to add anything about what they noticed?
Jeff, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. This may be what somebody else said, but it was obvious they had been modeled for her. I loved how she was the pictures. She was able to look at the pictures and know what it represented, and through the modeling that had been done, I love the way she used the inflection in her voice, and the questions she asked. It just was a great example of just exactly what you're saying. The story awareness and language awareness.
It's all there. She's engaging in the literacy behaviors, and because she's doing this at a young age, we know that she's going to get to that point of decoding. Now, I believe it's our last session in the series, we're going to start talking about how we get to that level of decoding in a developmentally appropriate way. But right now, we're just getting them into that thing of faking it until they're making it. They're acting like a reader, and that's going to cause them to become a reader. They're acting like a writer, and they're going to become a writer. So reading aloud to pre-kindergarten, kindergarten children is the best way to teach them the purposes and benefits of reading. It expands their vocabularies. Many of us don't use big words unless we're reading a book. The book gives us the big words to say, right? It helps them to understand that sentence structure. That's another thing. When we're just talking, we don't always use proper sentence structure, but usually books help us model proper sentence structure. And then it also increases their background knowledge. Background knowledge is a huge component to your child getting into kindergarten and being successful in kindergarten, because all learning is about connecting new information to old information. If your child has had experiences and your teacher starts talking about new information and they're able to recall and activate other things that are similar, it's going to cause them to learn better. When I was a student in grad school, I had to take a statistics class, and math is not necessarily my, big thing that I do well in. That first statistics class, I struggled through that entire thing. I made straight A's in my specialist degree and my doctorate, but I made a B in that statistics class. It was hard. I had to take 2 more statistics classes after that one. In the second class, I made an A, and it was because as we were doing that second class, I was remembering things I learned in the first class, and so that learning stuck. Same thing true for your children. If they've had experiences, going to the museum, going out and, seeing, going to another town, going to the beach, anything that you can do to get them out into the world and having experiences helps them. But sometimes we're limited in our ability to get to places, particularly right now. And so a really great backup plan to connecting your children to background knowledge is reading books to them. You can be anywhere in the universe by reading a book. So values of interactive read aloud, it teaches children to love books because they see you reading and they're reading. It's that emotional connection. It engages children in conversation about their thinking and their noticing. So as you're interacting, they're thinking about what you're thinking about, and then they'll go back and do after what you've modeled. It exposes children to that book language, introduces that new vocabulary, provides new information, and engages children with intriguing and beautiful illustrations. Most of our books have some really nice things to look at in terms of artwork and that kind of thing. So we also get that benefit. So when we're thinking about doing an interactive read aloud with our children, there's some steps that we want to go through. You want to pick up a book that you want to read, and you look at the book and you think, what are some things I want to say before we read that's going to help us understand the book? So this book is The Bear Ate Your Sandwich. So if I was thinking about some opening remarks, I'm going to read to my child this book, I might, if they've been to a zoo where there was a bear, I might say, do you remember when we went to the zoo and we saw that bear at the zoo? And talk about what the bear did and all that kind of thing. If we've not been to the zoo and seen a bear, then I might just talk about the sandwich then, because most of us have had a sandwich. What kind of sandwich do you like? Do you like mustard on your sandwich? Do you like mayonnaise? Do you want a tomato on there? You want me to put fish on your sandwich? You know, whatever it is, talk about your sandwich and kind of activate a prior experience. Sometimes that prior experience can be as simple as another book you've read before. Do you remember when we read about Goldilocks and the three bears? And so you start with that story and then you introduce this new story, The Bear Ate Your Sandwich. Okay. Then what you want to do is you want to go through the book. Now, this is before you're reading the book to your child. And you just want to go through and notice some things for yourself. You want to look for maybe some big words that they may not understand, that may be different to them. Like this page, it says, the scent of ripe berries drifted toward him and led to a wonderful discovery. You might key in on that word drifted and talk, think about how am I going to explain what that word drifted means to my child. And a great way to do that is to get you a little pad of sticky notes and then write down that word drifted and a little note about what you want to say about that word and just stick it to the page. That way, when you go through and read it to your child, you have that reminder of what you wanted to talk about. So you just kind of go through, look for those words, look for pictures that maybe remind you of some experience you've had before, another book you've read. Stop and find some places maybe where you would ask a question, like, or maybe ask a prediction of what's going to come next in the story. And again, just use the sticky note to kind of mark the book. And then think about what you want to discuss after you read the book. So when you get through the book. Now, for young children, you may not make it to the end of the book, and that's okay. If you're dealing with a very young child, you just want to read. But as children get older, particularly as they're getting like 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, you want to start encouraging them to stick through the entire story to the end and have a conversation afterwards. And then you'll notice the next step is to plan an engaging related activity following the reading. So like I did with my kids where they had art supplies that they could do. Let's draw pictures of bears, or let's do whatever, but have something that's more activity-based that follows the reading. So I want you to think for a minute. Is there a favorite book that you read with your kids? I used to read, always get the name wrong. One fish, is it red fish, blue fish? One fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish. Read that one over and over and over to my daughter, Julia. Cat in the Hat. Julie, what's your favorite book to read? I know your kids are all grown.
Yeah, my favorite book is Goodnight Moon, but I
Good night.
also like the Pete the Cat in the White Shoes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a favorite one.
So I just want you to think about, with that favorite book, how you might make that more interactive. Thinking about the Post-it notes, thinking about what experience can you talk about before you read it, thinking about those words and all those kinds of things. If we had more time, we'd dig into some books and do that. But you just want to kind of elevate that read aloud experience so that you're modeling and really getting your children thinking about that reading process. We don't have time to watch this, but I have a video of an interactive read aloud, and I'll post this in the email that I send so you guys can see it. But I don't want to end without also talking about writing, okay? Writing goes through the same interactive process. The difference being is it's a handing over of the pen type process. And so in the beginning, you may simply have your child telling you a story and you're writing down everything, okay? And they're seeing that you're connecting their words to that print. They're, again, not able to decode it, but they're making the connection. And as you do it, they're going to go through this process of emergent writing that starts with just some simple scribbles and then eventually starts looking more and more like real letters as they have the fine motor ability to make those letters. And they've engaged in lots of you sitting down and doing that writing with them. And then eventually they're going to begin to make some things that are, they look a lot like letters. And again, it's going to connect back to those real powerful letters, like that first letter in their name that they see, or maybe their friend's name or whatever. And then you can start doing some more interactive things where instead of you writing everything, let's say Lucy's telling me a story about how she loves her cat. I know she knows how to write the letter L. So I'll have her write the letter L, and then I'll fill in the rest of the word. And then as she learns to write her whole name and she's telling me a story that has her name, it may just be writing her name at the top, but she writes her name and then I fill in what I have to and let her write the parts that she can. So it's that same interactive process. And again, reading and writing are these closely connected processes. Readers have to recognize letters and words and reconstruct language and meaning. Writers have to compose ideas and then map out that language so that readers can make sense of it. And for young children, learning in one area always helps learning in the other area. And so what we're seeing now in our early childhood programs, going back to that pendulum swing, is the playtime and social training of traditional kindergartens is not needing to be replaced with this drill and practice literacy, but infused with literacy. It's play and intentional literacy instruction, giving children the opportunity to engage in these literacy behaviors. So as we're finishing, I want you to think about 3 things that I've talked about that were either new to you or they confirm something that you already knew. And I want you to think about 2 actions or strategies. I should have changed this instead of the classroom in your home as a result of the session. And then think about 1 question that you might have. So what was new or confirmed your thinking?
Well, for me, it was confirmed how important it is to model for children how to read and then to make sense of that reading by pointing out specific words, vocabulary words, adding a vocabulary word for the children.
Exactly. And what were you saying? Yeah, spending time on worksheets is not the best way. Yep. Yeah. Getting out of those repetitive drills. Yeah. More authentic experiences. What were you going to say earlier? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So teaching instead of just like doing it, like really getting them into an interactive process with literacy. Very, very good. So just a note, these are some books that I pulled information for this session from. Elkine's The Power of Play is a really great resource if you want to understand better about how important play is. Literacy Beginnings has a lot of more information about this interactive reading and writing if you're interested in that. I'd hoped we would have time at the end to read a book. Have any of you guys heard the Wonky Donkey before? All right, I'm going to read the Wonky Donkey real quick. I was walking down the road and I saw a donkey. Hee-haw! And he only had 3 legs. He was a wonky donkey. Now, before I started reading this, if I was doing this interactive with a child, we would have talked about something about a donkey or a farmer or something and activated that prior knowledge. And this wonky might be a word that I would stop, what does wonky mean? And talk about that wonky word. I was walking down the road and I saw a donkey. Hee-haw! He only had 3 legs and 1 eye. He was a winky wonky donkey. I was walking down the road and I saw a donkey. Hee-haw! He only had 3 legs, 1 eye, and he liked to listen to country music. He was a honky-tonky winky wonky donkey. I was walking down the road and I saw a donkey. Hee-haw! He only had 3 legs, 1 eye. He liked to listen to country music, and he was quite tall and slim. He was a lanky, honky-tonky, winky wonky donkey. We might talk about what does lanky mean. I was walking down the road and I saw a donkey. Hee-haw! He only had 3 legs, 1 eye. He liked to listen to country music. He was quite tall and slim, and he smelt really, really bad. He was a stinky, dinky, lanky, honky-tonky, winky wonky donkey. I was walking down the road and I saw a donkey. Hee-haw! He only had 3 legs, 1 eye. He liked to listen to country music. He was quite tall and slim. He smelt really, really bad. And that morning, he got up early and hadn't had any coffee. What do you guys think is going to happen? He was a cranky, stinky, dinky, lanky, honky-tonky, winky wonky donkey. I was walking down the road and I saw a donkey. Hee-haw! He only had 3 legs, 1 eye. He liked to listen to country music. He was quite tall and slim. He smelt really, really bad. That morning, he got up early and hadn't had any coffee, and he was always getting into mischief. He was a hanky, panky, cranky, stinky, dinky, lanky, honky-tonky, winky wonky donkey. I was walking down the road and I saw a donkey. Hee-haw! He only had 3 legs, 1 eye. He liked to listen to country music. He was quite tall and slim. He smelt really, really bad. That morning, he got up early and hadn't had any coffee. He was always getting up to mischief, but he was quite good looking. He was a spunky, hanky, panky, cranky, stinky, dinky, lanky, honky, tonky, winky, wonky donkey. I was walking down the road and I saw a donkey. Hee-haw! So another great thing about this book is the repetitive nature. And if you read this over and over and over again, the kids begin recognizing the parts of the story where the particular words, and that helps them to shift over into beginning to do that decoding part that we're going to talk about in another session. But it's because they're engaging in the behavior of literacy. They're faking it until they make it, and eventually they're going to make it. Thank you guys so much for your time today. We hope that you enjoyed the pizza, got some good information. We will all be coming back together again next week. Again, you can log in or be here with us live. And next week, we're going to drill into that Brain Smart play and how we can support getting your child ready for school through that process of play.